Dobar večer, poštovani gledalci. Mnoge stvari u Bosni i Hercegovini godinama se vrte u krug i drže nas taocima loših politika. Kreatori su oni koji ne vole ovu zemlju i koji nas vraćaju u mračnu prošlost 90-ih, kada su iste politike slomile zube u sudaru s BiH patriotama. Politike su iste, samo su igrači drugi. Kako im se suprotstaviti? Šta može Bosna i Hercegovina? Šta želi međunarodna zajednica? Kakav epilog možemo očekivati? Večeras razgovaramo sa profesorom filozofije iz studija Holokausta Davidom Pettigrewom. Dobro večer i hvala što govorite za emisiju 7+ i Hayat televiziju. Profesore Pettigrew, u posljednje vrijeme Milorad Dodik opet zaoštrava svoju retoriku i najavljuje odcjepljenje, secesije, konstantna priča o državnoj imovini, jer ukoliko se ne krene u tom pravcu u kojem on misli da treba. Koliko to smatrate ozbiljnom namjerom, koliko prijetnjom, odnosno kada usporedimo koliko ih je bilo takvih ranije?
I think this threat for secession needs to be taken seriously. It's a constant refrain coming from President Milorad Dodik. The latest kind of version, the latest rhetorical version of this was to say that he would secede, Republika Srpska would secede if the High Representative made a decision about state property. And I think this is it's almost a clever approach, saying that if secession happens, it's the High Representative's fault. But it's just the same refrain, which I think he's very serious about. I think we need to understand it as a long-term goal that needs to be addressed by the international community. He repeats the idea that Bosnia is a failed state, that it will deteriorate, fall apart on its own. So I think that's his goal. But the state property issue is just the latest excuse to push this issue.
Upravo Milorad Dodik najavljuje prekid veza sa ambasadama Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, Velike Britanije, što je povezano opet s pitanjem državne imovine, evo, na koje ste dijelom odgovorili kroz prvo pitanje, jer Dodik smatra da ove ambasade pripremaju rješenje koje opet ne odgovara njegovoj viziji.
So I'm not sure about this, but it did occur to me that the United States and the United Kingdom are two nations that brought sanctions against both Mr. Dodik and President Zvijanović. And it's possible that the sanctions are beginning to have an effect, which might affect his sense of his relation with the U.S. and the UK. It's important in terms of your previous question about the threat to secede, is that the sanctions were precisely brought because both of the nations, the United States and the United Kingdom, essentially charged Mr. Dodik and President Zvijanović with attempting to undermine the sovereignty of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So in terms of his latest act of saying that he was going to cut off relations, it could be because of they're taking a strong stance against him and against his nationalist rhetoric.
Spomenuli smo Dodika više puta, ali evo moram se dotaći njegovih komunikacija, odnosno optužbi na ambasadora Sada, gospodina Marfija, da podržava, kako je rekao, naoružavanje muslimana u Bosni i Hercegovini. Evo, podsjetit ću vas da je upravo poglavar islamske zajednice u Bosni i Hercegovini, Reisul Ulema Husein Efendija Kavazović, nedavno rekao da se Bosna i Hercegovina treba braniti ako je potrebno i oružjem, što je patriotska, a rekli bismo ne ratnohuškačka izjava.
I think that it's I wanted to express my solidarity with Reisul Ulema. He welcomed my son and myself to his office this past week. So, and I was grateful to have the opportunity to express my solidarity and to affirm that the Bosnia's Islamic community has every right to respond to these constant provocations. And I think, I wish I could quote my ambassador, directly, but I thought Ambassador Murphy's response was excellent in the sense that he was pointing out that there's been the constant hate, constant Islamophobic references, and essentially that the Islamic community had the right to respond and defend itself, as Bosnia itself has the right to respond and defend itself.
Upravo je reagovala i islamska zajednica u Bosni i Hercegovini. Oni su kazali kako Rejska Bazović ne ugrožava mir, ne poziva ni na nasilje, kako je to predstavljeno, te da je sve ovo zapravo nastavak stalnih napada Milorada Dodika na islam, na muslimane, na islamsku zajednicu. Koliko je opasna ovakva politika zasnovana kako na spinovanju, tako i na islamofobiji?
Well, I think this is an excellent question because I believe this kind of rhetoric for Milorad Dodik is one of the most important threats, most significant threats to the peace in Bosnia. Secession is problematic, but this constant hate speech, which is designed to have the effect of inciting, if nothing else, further hate, but also a possible repetition of the violence of the 90s. And that's why I think it has to be not only condemned, but prosecuted. And because hate speech is identified in the EU directives, EU Council laws and directives, especially from 2008, but even more recently in 2021. They're trying to encourage a response to hate speech to try to stop the rise in hate speech through criminal prosecution if necessary. And I think in this case, it's important to prosecute hate speech as part of a policy of transitional justice in Bosnia. And I'm concerned that the international community is not taking this seriously enough. But in terms of the right to prosecute hate speech or the agency of prosecuting hate speech, I think it's important to recall that in Bosnia's constitution, there's a line that says that the European Human Rights Convention has priority over all other laws. So I believe it's something it's an initiative that the High Representative's office should take.
Pa evo imamo i dalje gospodin Dodik nastavlja, odnosno evo najavljuje zakon o stranim agentima u koji namjerava svrstati sve strane organizacije koje djeluju na teritoriji cijele Bosne i Hercegovine. Kako vam se čini ta njegova najava uz zakon evo kojim želi kriminalizirati klevetu?
Well, if I understand these two laws, and again I think Ambassador Murphy made a very pointed response to both of these laws, that they're an attempt to consolidate power, to control dissent, and to silence the media. So with these laws in place, it's quite possible that the media would not be able to tell the truth. And that's why I think these laws need to be opposed. It's quite possible that they're in contravention to Bosnia's own constitution. But I think that the main problem in a conceptual sense is they move Republika Srpska further in the direction of a fascist state.
Imate li onda utisak da zapravo Dodik želi kontrolisati apsolutno sve procese u Bosni i Hercegovini?
Well, I'm not sure about that, except I feel that the policies of the High Representative, it seemed like with the backing of the European Union and the U.S. representatives, was to begin to take a turn and appease both Serbia and Croatia. And in that sense, they're appeasing, let's say, Serbian nationalists in Bosnia and Bosnian Croatian nationalists, if I said that clearly. And so the election law reform in October tended to encourage the nationalists, Serbian nationalists and Croatian nationalists, and it actually forged a kind of new alliance between the Serbian nationalists and Croat nationalists, so that whether you could say whether Milorad Dodik wanted to control the country or not, it was though the High Representative was handing him the keys to the kingdom. And now at this point, since that time, because the electoral reform was purportedly designed to encourage functionality, since that time things have not functioned so well, and I think that Mr. Dodik has made some very inflammatory statements that have characterized him or cast him as more of a pariah leader. So it seems like he may be losing grasp on that key.
Često je u javnosti znao negirati genocid u Srebrenici, tužilaštvo Bosne i Hercegovine formiralo je predmet. Kako mislite da će se sve to završiti? Mislite li da će domaće bosansko-hercegovačko pravosuđe imati snage da se konačno suoči s Miloradom Dodikom?
Well, it seems to me that if there was going to be a case against Milorad Dodik for genocide denial, it would be one of the most clear-cut cases in the history of legal procedure, because he has so brazenly denied the genocide. Only recently he said something like, we all know it didn't happen there, yet they insist on it so violently. So he's never hidden this idea of genocide denial. And it seems that the question is whether the prosecutor's office has the will to prosecute. So I would hope that the international community or the U.S. Embassy and the High Representative would encourage and support the prosecutor's office in this prosecution. And it would be a symbolic prosecution in the sense that there are others that need to be pursued. There are war criminals I've been studying who are hiding in Serbia who could also be prosecuted. But in terms of say case law or how prosecutions like this might proceed, there's a tremendous body of case law in Austria, for example, where they prosecute Holocaust denial or the glorification of the Nazi party.
Međunarodna zajednica u Bosni i Hercegovini često izgleda zadovoljava samo saopćenjima kada reagiraju na sve ovo o čemu smo pričali. Tužilaštvo Bosne i Hercegovine djeluje bojažljivo. Šta je prema vašem mišljenju onda rješenje jedne ovakve situacije?
I think that's an excellent question, because my impression has been that the representatives of the international community they hesitate out of a kind of fear that if they support issues in truth and justice, support the right to memorialization, or prosecute genocide denial, that somehow they'll provoke the people who are being investigated or prosecuted, and they're trying to avoid. And so I think the problem is that they're operating from a position of fear, which I think is a mistake. I think this last week, my son and I met also with mothers of Srebrenica, and we talked about how these words mean something to them. They mean something in Bosnia to survivors of the genocide in ways they might not mean as much to other people. And that's the words, are truth and justice. Istina and Pravda. And I think that the international community can't be afraid to support the right to memorialization or to stop genocide denial and hate speech. Also because it's beyond truth and justice, it's also re-traumatizing for the survivors who deserve to be protected. And they feel, if the mothers told me, they feel like the people who are denying genocide and threatening secession just do it with impunity, with no consequences whatsoever. It just seems outrageous.
Sami ste spomenuli istina i pravda. Koliko je važno globalno, evo u svijetu, pojačavati tu svijest? Vidimo da se genocid i dalje negira. Svjedočili ste evo nedavno pred parlamentarnom komisijom u državi Connecticut u vezi sa zakonom o proglašenju 11. jula, dana sjećanja na genocid u Srebrenici.
Well, this is an incredibly important situation where out of tragedy, many of the Bosnian refugees in Connecticut are survivors of descendants of the survivors of the Srebrenica genocide. And so out of tragedy comes hope, where they've banded together to appeal to the state legislature in Connecticut to pass a law that would designate July 11th as Bosnian Genocide Remembrance Day in Connecticut. I don't know if it'll be the first state with that law, but it's one of the few, although other cities have done something similar. And it was very inspiring for me to participate in the process. One of the main organizers is a very young college student who I worked with when he was in high school. So he's doing an internship with a state senator, and he encouraged the state senator, Senator Suad Anwar, who is himself a refugee from Pakistan, to sponsor the law. But so the young man's name is Bekir Hodzic, and he's, if I can say that, he was named after his uncle who died on the Srebrenica death march. But he has this dedication to the truth. And working in the community also, I want to mention Leila Duric, who's one of the organizers. So they brought this proposal to the Connecticut legislature, and it was a kind of a marathon session in which about 25 members of the Bosnian community and myself testified in support of the bill. And the head of the committee, or co-chair of the committee, Mr. Blumenthal, was very, very grateful. At the end, he thanked people for their very moving and informative testimonies. So now we're hoping for a good result. But I think it's important to raise awareness about the truth of the genocide in general, so that people learn the truth, but also to resist denial that is happening both in Republika Srpska, but also there's a lobby that's trying to spread lies about what happened in Bosnia. There's a film, for example, called Srpska, The Struggle for Freedom, by Boris Malagurski, that's touring the world, that's spreading lies about the Srebrenica genocide, about what happened in Bosnia. So that's why it's a very, very powerful movement in Connecticut that's important for many reasons.
Evo, ranije ste kroz neka pitanja spomenuli međunarodnu zajednicu u Bosni i Hercegovini. Veliki dio javnosti u Federaciji BiH također nije zadovoljan njenom ulogom, posebno kada je riječ o potezima visokog predstavnika Kristijana Schmidta, kojima je učvrstio dodatno etničke podjele. Mislite li da će doći do novih nametanja nekih njegovih odluka?
Well, that's an excellent question because of previous events. But I don't know if I would have a concrete answer. There's a concern that the High Representative would try to impose some change that would change the selection of the representatives in the Federation, which is normally of the government, normally done by the President and two Vice Presidents. But the two of the presidents don't want to cooperate with the other presidents, so they're trying to the other vice presidents. They're trying to bypass that person. So that's something people are concerned about. But what I thought about when you asked this question was that I noticed the other day, in the wake of Mr. Dodik's threats for secession, that the High Representative did something else that I think it's important to mention, which was that he met with the commander of the Althea mission in Bosnia. So I think that sends an important message.
Dragan Čović je vječni optimist kada govorimo o formiranju federalne vlade. Nekoliko puta je najavio, bez objašnjenja na koji način će se to desiti. Mislite li da on zna nešto što drugi ne znaju? Evo, nije nepoznanica da je upravo Hrvatska demokratska zajednica radi zaista blisko sa visokim predstavnikom Kristijanom Schmidtom.
I'm not sure, but I think it's relevant. Something I was mentioning earlier, I was just thinking about that the election reform of October 2nd tended to say favor the nationalist position of HDZ. And so this could give Mr. Čović reason for hope. And it's problematic because that decision seemed to overvalue the Croat vote, while undervaluing the Bosniak vote. This is something that's sort of obvious on paper, but also ignoring the European Court of Human Rights, directives for Bosnia. What I found troubling was that I think it's related to this question in this context, that the outcome of that decision, one of the outcomes of that decision is that I'm sure there are other reasons for this to be the case, but the new president of the Federation had a photo opportunity with a convicted war criminal, Mr. Kordic, I believe, and then defended this, saying they had this enduring friendship. She was a loyal friend, and this was, I thought, problematic, and because Mr. Kordic had been one of the architects of the idea of a greater Croatia. So in that sense, it's a consequence, it seems to me, of the way in which the election reform favored the HDZ and their ideology of either a greater Croatia or a third entity. So that relationship of Bradara and Kordic, I thought was problematic.
Yes. Mnogi kažu da Hrvatska demokratska zajednica kontroliše trojku, odnosno mnogi misle da trojka udovoljava HDZ upravo samo kako bi ostala u vlasti. Jeste li vi saglasni s takvim mišljenjima?
Well, it seems to me that this is it's the same. It follows what I was trying to talk about in answering the previous question, because in a sense, perhaps I avoid this question about the personal relationship. It's something that may or not be true, or there's some kind of close tie there. Where in my personal experience, I'm not sure about that. Although I respect and accept all of the reports and photographs and the historical recognition of a reward that he received. But what I'm looking at is the way in which this October 2nd decision directly favored the HDZ, and that's what I find problematic. When what Bosnian citizens, civic communities have been asking for is the opportunity to operate as a normal democracy.
Evo, profesore, više puta ste spomenuli nametanje Schmidtovih odluka u izbornoj noći 2. oktobra prošle godine. Priča o popuni Ustavnog suda važna je upravo zbog odluke o apelaciji Željka Komšića u vezi sa Schmidtovim nametanjem. Kakav tu rasplet možemo očekivati? Evo, šta mislite bili?
I think that sometimes there's a legal issue, but then a court can have a political dimension, and sometimes the decision depends on the members of the court. And what I've been following in the news is that there's some issue about the next possible appointee to the court who would possibly be favorable to HDZ and to the decision of October 2nd. So this would mean that, and this would be true in any country, in any court, even on the Supreme Court in the United States, where you have people have very clear political positions that they're taking, that will no doubt affect their judgment to some extent. And in that case, I don't know what would happen. But what I think it's important to make the argument that I'm sure Mr. Komšić has made, that the timing of the decision violated the Venice Commission on good conduct in elections, because it was made on the eve of the election, and it completely rejected the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights that said Bosnia should become a democratic, move in the democratic direction, make democratic arrangements without further delay. It overvalued, as I said earlier, Bosnian and Croat votes while undervaluing Bosniak votes. And so it completely undermines faith in democracy. So what I hope will happen is that there'll be effective. This won't be the only challenge, and if the decision isn't changed by the Constitutional Court, I'm hoping there'll be other challenges, and Bosnia will move towards a multi-ethnic democratic state.
I evo, pred kraj ovog razgovora, profesore, ne mogu da vas ne pitam, nedavna dešavanja u Sjevernoj Makedoniji, odnosno, razgovori između Beograda i Prištine uz posredstvo predstavnika međunarodne zajednice. Šta bi dogovor o međusobnom priznanju značio za Bosnu i Hercegovinu? Neki kažu da bi gubitak Kosova za Srbiju možda značio pokušaj određene kompenzacije sa entitetom Republika Srpska, a bi li nešto takvo dozvolila upravo međunarodna zajednica?
Well, I think that this is an important question for Bosnia, but for the moment, my sense of the situation is that there's less of an agreement than there is of a conversation. That there are these very tentative agreements to keep talking about next steps and so forth, if you see what I mean. And then there was a disagreement. For example, each side disagrees with some specific aspect. One aspect would be the Association of Serb Municipalities, which a number of people have spoken against because it would be something like establishing these mini Republika Srpskas within Kosovo. That's an overgeneralization, but there's been a concern about that. But the important thing is, one could say that, and I don't think that Mr. Vučić signed this agreement to keep talking, but I think the European Union is to be credited that they're trying to keep people talking. The talking is better than having troops on the border. So that's important. I think Commissioner Borrell is doing a good job in keeping the conversation going. But in the end, I think because it's such a tentative agreement and that steps are moving very tentatively, that there's nothing that would directly affect Bosnia at this time. And I think it's important for me to mention that in spite of my concerns about the High Representative or about U.S. foreign policy, that it's always in the case of Bosnians' sovereignty, territorial integrity, the High Representative and the United States government through Ambassador Murphy and Secretary of State Blinken has been very clear that they continue to believe and defend in Bosnia's sovereignty. That's important to say, whatever's going on with the tentative agreements between Kosovo and Serbia.
Profesore, hvala vam mnogo za izdvojeno vrijeme i što ste još jednom govorili za Hayat televiziju.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss these questions.
Hvala i vama, poštovani gledaoci. Pratili ste još jedno izdanje emisije 7+. Preporuka da ostanete uz program Hayat televizije. Želimo vam ugodan ostatak večeri i doviđenja.